Like for us, storing the data it's an important part and it's necessary, but that's almost the boring part. You need to add the right metadata and context and everything. Only then can you do the interesting stuff of finding it. Data is, I feel like, almost more relevant than in the past because you just unlock so many things. And that's the exciting part for us and why AI is an important part in search, that you have all of these new things that you can unlock. So you can actually, with the same data that you've had before, you suddenly can get a lot more value out of that. That's why it's a very exciting time. You have all of this amazing data and you can work with that. And now you can put that data even more to work, which is a great feature.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Web Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Ocel, VP of Innovation at This.Labs, joined by, of course, my very favorite co-host, Danny Thompson. Danny is the Director of Technology at This.Labs. Danny, how are you doing?
I'm here. I'm doing well. Happy to be back and happy to be recording with Philipp today.
That's right. We have to record quickly before Danny melts, but we'll maybe get to that in a little bit. We're very happy to be joined today by Philipp Krenn. Philipp is the Head of DevRel and Developer Advocacy at Elastic. Philipp, how are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I mean, real quick icebreaker, because we were talking about this a little bit in the pre-show, but, you know, it is summer. As we know, a lot of us are taking vacations in the U.S. We get like 2 days vacation, but our European friends are all enjoying their like month and a half off or whatever it is they do in the summers. So my question to you guys is, what kind of vacationer are you? Do you stack all the tourist attractions, go from sun up to sundown, get your 50,000 steps in every single day? Or how do you guys prefer travel when you get out?
Yeah, no. So it depends on the goal. So if I'm vacationing where it's like a vacation to recover, I want to sleep in, I want to relax, I want to just veg out on some TV, let my body recover. If it's a vacation to go experience something, to the max. Like I'm going, but I don't really like touristy stuff. Like I'm not going to see attractions. I want to go eat where the locals eat. I want to go eat at the hole in the wall place. I want to dance with the devil with food poisoning. Like, am I going to get sick? Am I not? I want to curse like them. I want to do all that and really absorb the culture. And so that's kind of my style of vacationing. I've never been excited about architecture, but I am excited about like experiences with people that I may or may not meet again, but may end up making lifelong friendships with.
Nice. So I'm originally European, so I'm used to more vacation time. I feel like we're slightly more relaxed about that. It's neither extreme. It's more like you have the time, so you can do your thing, but you also don't have to stress out too much about it. So yeah, as a European, I feel like the vacation feeling is just very different because while you might not have always 1.5 months, like most people have 2 or 3 weeks, so it's a bit more relaxed. Whereas yeah, the US is slightly more compressed. So I feel like sometimes Americans have very much a compressed experience they need to squeeze in.
That's exactly right. I lived in a place for almost 5 years, and I had a buddy come and visit me for a week. He saw more in a week than I saw in the 5 years I was there. So that is how U.S. people like to travel. I don't know, for us, my wife is amazing at putting together trips, but the way we do it is we just plan where we want to eat, and then we figure out what's between those things. That's usually how we do tourist stuff, and it usually works out really, really well. So we pick like a couple spots to eat every day, and then we just go, you know, what things are we going to see in nearby? And that seems to work pretty well for us. I don't know, Dan, it's a little bit of a mix between your style and a more casual style. But hopefully everybody's enjoying their trips that they're taking or have taken this summer. Let us know if you went somewhere really special. But Philipp, we brought you here because we wanted to talk about all the really cool things about Elastic, you know, especially Elasticsearch and what's been going on there. I think for some people, it's been amazing. Do you know offhand how long Elasticsearch has been a part of the community? Because it just feels like it's been there literally forever. And you know, it's been a central part of the entire ecosystem. Do you have even any idea how long it's been around? I know you've been there for a decade, so it's like...
Yeah, so I've been at Elastic for more than 9 years, but we had the 15-year anniversary of Elasticsearch this year. So in April, I think this year, we had 15 years of like the first blog post, release of the code, the first binary being out there. So it's been a while.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's such a great milestone. For people, I mean, you know, there's still going to be a lot of people that are listening to this that maybe haven't had an opportunity to use it or have run across it. So do you have like a little elevator pitch on kind of what Elasticsearch is and a little bit about why it's, you know, been so special in the industry?
Sure. So my pitch always starts with like, you're probably using Elasticsearch on a daily basis, even if you don't know or see it. So if you search on Wikipedia or Stack Overflow or in many other places, behind the search box, Elasticsearch is doing the search for you. And then we kind of like morph from the full text search problem where it started initially into this logging tool where it was very big, like classic Elk Stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. Those are all our products. So we've been doing a lot of logging, and by now it's full observability, but logging is kind of like the core aspect of what we've been doing, because we figured out that all of these are search problems, kind of like. Sometimes it's full text search, you want to find the product on an e-commerce store. But sometimes it's like, oh, it's this outage or this log line that you want to find. So you have a large amount of data and you want to find what is relevant for you. And then as a third solution, more or less, we have security, because security is kind of similar again. It's like the bad guys are doing something or there's some attack going on and you want to find what is relevant for you. So finding relevant data quickly and in a very flexible way, that is kind of like the core approach that we've had. And I feel like we've come almost full circle, because now with all the LLMs and search sometimes, or now being again interesting and relevant, and also having budget, that's another very interesting part. Like search has always been around, but now it has budget again. So we've come full circle, going from search to logging to security, and now we're very much back at search while doing all three things. But search is kind of like the hot thing again that everybody talks about, because we have so many more tools at our disposal. And while search is probably never going to be solved, well, we know how much search is always like could be improved in many places. So there's a long way to go, and I don't think it's like a technically solvable problem. But we have more tools to make your search actually more relevant and more targeted for what you're trying to do. So that is kind of like the core concept of what we're interested in.
You know, with this is interesting. So for those that don't know, or if they haven't seen it, Philipp was one of the 20 experts that we ended up interviewing in the AI engineer video that we did. And we got to meet there, and it was a really great conference, and it was very interesting seeing how Elasticsearch is even playing out in this. And so like with the rise of, you know, vector search and Gen AI and all that good stuff, how do you see Elastic's role evolving with this AI focused space, and where do you see that use case really playing out the most?
Right. So I think we've been saying this for a while, and I feel like the rest of the industry is coming along to that point now. It's like, for us, it's always been about information retrieval in RAG, retrieval augmented generation. The R stands for retrieval. It doesn't say vector search or anything like that. It's really retrieval. It's like finding the right context. And finding the right context can totally be vector search. And we've invested very heavily in vector search. Like yesterday, actually, we had a release where we added another very cool optimization for vector search just to reduce the cost. But vector search for us is a feature. Like the general space, so what we're trying to solve is information retrieval, which is decades old and has been evolving for a long time. And we sometimes, especially if you're newer to the industry, you shouldn't forget that like people have been working on this kind of problem or area for a long time, and there was stuff before vector search. And I feel like when RAG popped up like 2-3 years ago, like at first we were very focused on vector search, but now everybody kind of like seems to broaden the scope again, and it's like vector search is a very important part and an important feature, but it is not the full scope of retrieval. Like retrieval is really that full picture that you want to have. You want to find what is relevant, and it could be keyword search, it could be vector search, it could be a combination when you do hybrid search. You could have other ranking factors, like you could have like, I don't know, since we've been talking about restaurants, if you search for restaurants, it could be like how far is the restaurant away. That might be a factor. Like what is the rating? All of these things have some space in that retrieval, and it's not just the vector search that is doing that. And I feel like we've been slightly over-focused just because it's new and exciting, and we were trying to explore that space, that everything was vector search. But I think we are kind of like moving beyond that. That was like 2 or 3 years ago when RAG popped up, everything was only vector search. But now we're luckily getting back to that. Information retrieval is a very broad space, and it could just be like, I don't know, match this substring and find something, or like I'm searching for a brand name, and then keyword search might be doing very well because I'm just looking exactly for that brand. I don't look for the meaning or context around the brand.
I love that. So this idea that, because like you were saying too, with the observability, everything is shifting to this idea that I have a lot of data. And a lot of data exists. And so what the trick is not necessarily in the storage of that data, but in the finding of relevant data. I've seen this come up recently. Like sometimes like I'll be talking to somebody and I'll say, oh, there's an amazing video you have to watch. It's this one where they say this, but I don't know who they are. And I realize like there is still these really like these weaknesses around things that exist, but very difficult to find them. And that problem is obviously true for human beings trying to share clips to each other, but it's true for agents and for just systems generally who, when there is a piece of data, but you have to find what used to be called Google Foo, right? That secret way to find it. So what are some of the ways that you guys are looking? I mean, I know you just had another major release recently. Like what are some of the ways that y'all are helping to solve this problem, to make things more retrievable? Again, not just in AI space, but maybe for users as well.
Right. So I think your point was great about like for us, storing the data it's an important part and it's necessary, but that's almost the boring part. You need to add the right metadata and context and everything. Only then can you do the interesting stuff of finding it. From our history over the last 15 years, things have shifted dramatically. Like initially it was all about keyword search, and then maybe you defined your synonyms and you had your language analyzers, but that was limited, especially if you have like a scenario that you described where you're looking for something and you can more describe the concept, but you don't really know the right keywords. Previously, you would be stuck. And now we have all of these wonderful LLM tools that we can either generate the output that we want, like with classic RAG. Though my other example that I really like is that the generation doesn't always have to be at the end, because I feel like when we talk about RAG, it's normally we retrieve and then we augment and then we generate that stuff. That is very common. Sometimes it's almost the other way around. Like you could do very interesting query rewriting. So my example with recipes, for example, is let's say you're thinking of a dish and you cannot remember like what it is called. Like you want to retrieve the recipe. So you don't need generation at the end because you just want the full recipe retrieved. But you can't remember what the dish is called anymore. And then to the LLM, you could describe what you're looking for. So for example, you say like, oh, it's an Italian dish and it has these layers of pasta and then it has like meat and this white sauce in between. And then the LLM could say like, oh, you're looking for lasagna. And then you can actually search for, or the LLM can then say like, retrieve the lasagna recipe, and then it will get back. So I think there is a lot to be done, and how search is now suddenly much more powerful. And it could be this query rewriting or generation on the input, or the generation of the output if you have like very large documents and you just want to have a quick overview. Or it could also help you like, oh, we have a ton of data and you want a quick overview report, or you want to have a specific format outputted. I think there are a lot of annoying or almost boring problems in the past that can now be solved, and that it is an exciting space because we're all about storing large amounts of data and then finding what is relevant, and that what is relevant and how to work with it has now completely changed in terms of like LLMs making the search better or generating better output, or just the interaction model. Like MCP is the topic everybody has to mention at least 5 times at this point. Obviously, we have an MCP server. It's featured on the Docker Hub MCP store, or whatever they call it, hub. It's on the AWS marketplace for MCP. Because it's just such an interesting or easygoing concept. It's like, oh, you talk to your LLM, you describe what you want, and then it will just go and get the data. So data is, I feel like, almost more relevant than in the past, because you just unlock so many things. And that's the exciting part for us, and why AI is an important part in search, that you have all of these new things that you can unlock. Or to pull in a different example with observability or security, for example, or let's say for observability, you could do root cause analysis in a much more comprehensive way, that you say like, were there any errors and what were the reasons for that? And then it could go to the logs and see like, okay, there were these errors, and then it could see like, oh, I see that, I don't know, this metric was too high because, I don't know, the database was overloaded. And then it could actually tell you and get you the answers. So you can actually, with the same data that you've had before, you suddenly can get a lot more value out of that. That's why it's a very exciting time. And it's like, sometimes you see things as a threat. It's like, how does my product fit into all of this? But actually it's a big opportunity. Like you have all of this amazing data and you can work with that. And now you can put that data even more to work, which is a great feature.
What do you think about, I mean, I'm asking both of you guys, because this is something I've been thinking about. I had somebody on my team ask me recently, can the agent answer backend API calls? And, you know, obviously they weren't really pitching that as a product idea, but it was more of an idea, right? Because think about that. That's kind of the fulfillment of a promise that GraphQL had, for example. Like, what if I didn't have to have such a static API? What if I could just tell the backend, hey, I just want some data. This is kind of the data I want. And it would go into the system and fetch everything and give it back to me. And it turns out to be really powerful if you were to implement it. The issue is that A, it's very expensive, and B, it's very slow. So I was trying to think, like, well, what would you do with the idea that this feature works, but you can't actually deploy it to production? And one of my thoughts was this idea, like, what if we could, like you said, right, use something that would help us retrieve things? And maybe the net result then is that it has to inform us after it finds it. Maybe what are the better ways to index our data so that it would have been easier to find the lasagna recipe? Or what are the ways that we need to organize things so that that's an easier pathway for others to follow? Have you guys looked into this, or do you guys have other thoughts on ways that we can maybe utilize some of the amazing benefits when we have to take this idea to scale, as far as how powerfully LLMs can just give us, you know, things based on vague requests?
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like you can automate and remove so many annoying problems from the past. So classic logging example, what people have been doing, like oftentimes, is like defining logging patterns, and it's like, this is the timestamp, and this is the log level, and this is the message, and these are some metadata fields that are relevant, like this is the user. And in the past, especially with the elk stack, and that has been a bit of a pain point sometimes, it's like you wrote these regular expressions, that we call them the grok patterns, to extract all of that data. But with an LLM, you probably don't have to do that manually anymore. That is an area where we're very actively working on right now. Is like a log message comes in, LLMs do an amazing job at actually figuring out what is what. And then you could just like try to parse that, and then let's say every 10,000 log messages or so from one system, you look at it, like, did anything change? Do we need to adjust? Or if you cannot properly parse something out, like, you might have to reanalyze it. But previously, a human would need to go in and adjust the patterns and patch up the data, and now an LLM can just decide what to do. And then it could also add the relevant metadata, or figure out like what is interesting here. It might even decide like what data to keep for the long term and what not. There's so many more things that you can do. So that is a really exciting feature. I think the other thing, that AI agents are the very hot topic right now, but like you said, the timing, or like the response times, are sometimes suffering. This is almost, I find that kind of like entertaining almost, because I remember like a couple of years ago when we said like, oh, the Elasticsearch query takes 250 milliseconds, and then people were like, oh, this is so slow. This needs to be faster, we can't use this. And now with LLM, suddenly it's like, oh, it takes 5 seconds, and everybody is sure. Takes 5 seconds, that's perfectly fine. Maybe that will change again, but I feel like some things have evolved a bit. I mean, if the LLM adds enough value to wait for 5 seconds, probably it's a good trade-off, but I don't think anybody wants to wait for 5 seconds. So I think we can, as an industry, we will work on that and improve that. The other thing with AI agents is, especially if you try to combine them, there is this problem right now of compounding errors. So it's like, if you have one agent doing something and it works 99% of the time, that is probably acceptable. But if you have like 20 steps or 20 different agents combined, and then each one has a 99% chance of doing the right thing, the compounding error gets pretty large and makes the responses less reliable. So one of the patterns that I keep seeing is that slightly like systems that have a bit less automation, or like more human in the loop, or fewer automated steps, or a bit more guidance, seem to be more reliable and be doing better than like this full on magic. It's like, here you have 25 agents and they will do 50 calls against each other, and then magic will happen. Often works for demos, but in reality it might still struggle. Though maybe this is just a passing time right now, and it will adjust over time. I think it's just a process that we're going through. But that seems to be one of the areas where it's like, it's very exciting because you can. It's just not, maybe it's not what you want to do in production, or to come back to MCP. It's like, looking at security, for example, MCP can sometimes be very wild, or I'm sometimes like, I hope nobody does that in production, because you're basically saying like, here's all the data, LLM, please do the right thing and do something, and don't delete my data and don't leak anything, or do the right thing. So we still seem to be in a bit of like this honeymoon phase where we explore, but I'm sure there are many good parts like automating like this log parsing, and there are many things that we will take for granted, I think, very soon.
You know, a lot of our listeners here, many have many years of experience, many work in big companies, many work in small companies, or many are working on tiny teams, right? Which is a dedicated track, even an AI engineer, which you're seeing like a very large emergence of. And so as you were talking, I started thinking about AI engineer and some of the people I was talking to. Is there some maybe 2, 3, 4 best practices that somebody could be leveraging Elasticsearch for that maybe they're not thinking about as far as architectural decisions or where they may be placing it or something along those lines?
I mean, I think the interesting thing, especially for small teams, is that Elasticsearch is more than one use case. So it's not just vector search. That's the other thing where I always say like vector search is just a feature. So I think you really want this full information retrieval thing, or the full information retrieval feature set. But the good thing is if you have Elasticsearch, you can then add the logging, or for example, you can log like what were all the queries that came into the LLMs and what were the answers that people responded with. You could then see like what is the latency, if you have like a feedback loop from the end user, like with the thumbs up and thumbs down, was it good or bad? You can package all of these features into, or with Elasticsearch into one product. So especially if you're a small team, you probably don't want to have 60 different technologies, but you want to have a few core technologies. And that's why we're always excited to have like multiple use cases to give you one box basically that covers multiple of these use cases, just to let you move faster with fewer moving pieces or fewer tools in the loop.
All right, we have more of our episode to come, but first we'd like to thank today's sponsors, This.Labs. This episode is sponsored by This.Labs, your trusted experts in modern web development and AI consulting. We're not in the business of chasing trends, but at This.Labs, we're in the practice of moving technology forward with discipline, clarity, and intent. Our team brings deep engineering expertise paired with strategic insight to help modern enterprises build smarter, faster, and more adaptive systems. From seamless LLM integrations to the development of AI-driven applications, we ensure that every solution is designed not only to meet today's challenges, but to unlock tomorrow's capabilities as well. We've worked with clients like Google, Microsoft, Stripe, Bill.com, and many other great organizations. Check us out at ai.this.co. That's ai.thisdot.co. Big thanks to This.Labs and my team for sponsoring this episode and for their unwavering commitment to advancing the developer community and riding the AI wave. All right, now back to our episode. So, Philipp, we've talked a little bit about kind of some of the new features that y'all have been releasing recently. I know that you, as the time that we're taping this, have just released a new version, 9.1, if I'm not mistaken. You know, congratulations on that one. I think I was really impressed with I love organizations and teams that run with a good roadmap and a good kind of regular development cadence. I mean, the Node team is really great at this. The Angular team is really great at this. I love when a community and a product I'm using, I can depend on them to have regular releases. Go into it a little bit about, I guess, it doesn't have to be this most recent release, but just kind of what are you guys currently doing with this sort of 9.0, branch of Elastic? Is there a grand strategy for the whole thing, or is it just normal semantic versioning type of situation? And what are kind of the big features that people maybe didn't realize are just coming down the pipe?
Right. So, I mean, versioning, that is kind of like almost its own episode. We have gone through various iterations or like pain points. It's also, while we have kind of semantic versioning, like we'll keep breaking changes to the major version, of course, but if we consider something more of a bug, there might be a small breaking change. It's also because our products are so vast. It's a bit like, what do you consider the API surface in terms of breaking? So for example, there are Elasticsearch, you can add plugins, and that API we do not consider part of like the surface for breaking changes. So there we might have a breaking change if you write an Elasticsearch plugin. For us, the REST API, since Elasticsearch, it's all REST calls that you interact with it, that is kind of like the sacred part. there we cannot make any breaking changes unless it's really like fixing a bug. We actually had like 2 weeks ago, we had an interesting start of a discussion. Is like, do we sometimes return the right error or response code? Like, should something that we're returning a 500 today, should that not be a 400? And there we're on the fence now that might be a bug there, and we might just change it in a minor. We'll have to see about that. But yes, generally we have major versions that come out every couple of years. It's not an exact cadence, but it's like every 2 or 3 years at this point. We've just had 1 quarter ago, more or less, we've had 9.0. So the new release schedule that we have is approximately quarterly. We don't guarantee any dates, also because sometimes there's a good reason to ship a bit earlier or later. We find a bug, or there's some good reason to adjust that. But for everybody's expectation, like, we do minor releases every quarter approximately nowadays. And then we'll keep on the current major version, we'll always have 2 minor versions under active maintenance. So we've had 9.0 came out a quarter ago. That's going for another quarter approximately. 9.1 came yesterday. That will then be supported or maintained until 9.3, and then we'll just iterate on minor versions, and we'll do hopefully many more. Like, we have switched quite a while to that mode ago, that breaking changes are for the major versions. Features get constantly shipped in minor versions. So pretty much every quarter there will be a good batch of new features. In part because we do so much. Sometimes I'm like, are we doing too much? It's almost for me hard to keep up, because we have 3 different solutions. So like, search and vector search is a very busy and active field with all the AI features there. And so like, there's a lot going on in every minor release there. But then there's observability and like all the open telemetry integrations that we lean in very heavily. Like, we're at this point one of the top open telemetry contributors. I think in the last month or quarter, we were like in a tight spot for first. So we do a lot there as well. So there is 3 different products with 3 very different approaches of like what we need to ship in terms of features. That's why no release is boring. I must say this one has been very smooth. We have these windows. It's like we find a bug at this point, and then we need to delay the release by a bit to kind of like fix it. This one has been going very smoothly. I actually hope that it wasn't because people were on vacation and nobody tested properly. But so far it looks good. That's always the danger. Like, when the release is too smooth, then you will find problems afterwards. But this one has been good. Hopefully we keep riding the easy release wave, because there's a big machinery behind it. It's like we have so many different products, and then so many different binaries, and then you have language clients and the Kubernetes operator. Like, there's so many pieces in this release that it's really a big operation.
Well, like I said, it's got to take you back a little bit, because as you mentioned, everybody's using Elasticsearch, whether they realize it or not, probably every single day. So every one of these releases is a huge deal, because so much of the world suddenly shifts into something. And, I appreciate the attention to breaking changes. Sometimes it's really hard when you're talking about certain things that might be bugs, but now that's in your API service, and you don't know if somebody has a piece of code that's parsing that particular response, expecting it in that circumstance, and suddenly not having it breaks something. I classically remember the Windows example where they had to skip over Windows 9 because of how much code was in the wild parsing versions for 9, meaning 95 or 98. So they had to skip from Windows 8 to Windows 10 just to avoid all of that. They realized it was going to be a breaking change. So it's a very tough thing, like you said, for being a 15-year-old product. That's a lot of user land cruft and experience and existing code that has built up that you guys have to be very cognizant of. So definitely not an easy task.
Yeah, I'm always reminded, like, there's this XKCD comic about like something is a bug, like that the CPU is overheating or whatever, and then somebody says like, oh no, this is how I built my entire workflow. Like, this is a feature that the CPU is overheating because it triggers something else. For me, this is a feature, but for everybody else, it's a bug. That's kind of like also comes back to like the response codes. It's like somebody was like, but maybe somebody relies on this specific response code here, and we're like, yeah, but if they do, then they're probably using this in a way they shouldn't. But it is always interesting for us with such a large user base. Like, I think we've recently crossed 5 billion downloads across all our products. You have a lot of use cases that you never anticipated, and then you're like, oh, that's interesting. We didn't know we could do that, or we didn't know that anybody would want to do that. So we often learn something ourselves. That's the great thing about like a very broad tool, that people use it in all kinds of ways.
Well, we're getting closer to the end. I mean, maybe let's touch on something a little sort of philosophical. Like I said, you've been at the company for 10 years. We're in the midst of this insanely supercharged AI sort of revolution going on right now. I mean, I laugh because I talk to some people on my team. They get angry if the agent they've been using for coding hasn't shipped a new release in the last like 2 weeks. They're like, this one's dead now. It's not even being maintained anymore. So, how do you take such a mature company and operate in such a fast-paced environment? That's got to just be kind of a crazy shift to the pressures that all these communities and these people that need Elasticsearch for their RAG, for their AI products, for whatever they're trying to do. And as these things evolve so quickly, what has that done to the organization, to what you do, to what the team's trying to do to be on top of things and relevant, but at the same time not over accelerate a company that has a lot of production users that need you guys to be stable as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting balance because for AI, like you said, like every other week there is a new release, and it feels like if you are not keeping up, then you're out almost. On the other hand, if you have a very established user base, like we're in very big companies, and you tell them, oh, we'll release every quarter, and then you'll need to update every 6 months, they are like, oh, this is very soon, or this is kind of like a very fast pace for us. So it's very different trade-offs. I feel like there's also like, at one point, you're this exciting thing and people cannot wait for new releases. But at some point, things settle down a bit, and then people are actually happy if it doesn't break all the time, or if it doesn't change all the time. I feel like in terms of breaking changes, LangChain has sometimes earned a bit of a reputation there because they have been moving a lot over the place, and then things broke. I think LangGraph is trying to take a more stable approach. But people learn over time that it's exciting, and then you rewrite everything every week. That's great for some time, but that's for a bigger software project at some point. That's probably also not where you want to go. But it is. I think it's a good pressure point for us as a company as well, that you need to keep evolving and pushing. That's one of the interesting conversations that I had at some point, where somebody was like, so what are you doing about this thing? And this came out, and when is that coming? And then I was like, so you're a bigger company, like you're going to use all of this tomorrow? And then they were pretty much like, no, I'm not going to use that, but I want you to be able to do that and move quickly enough, because that gives me confidence that you will be, whatever comes next, you will be able to adjust quickly enough and be there when it's needed. So I think that's an important point as an organization, that you need to be able to work with the current trends and make the most out of them, just to stay relevant for your users and customers.
Well, very quickly, we arrived at the end of our conversation, Philipp, at least for today. And where can people find out more about you online? Where can they connect with you? Where can we send them to get connected with, to find out more about Elastic and Elasticsearch and all that?
Yeah, so Elastic is easy. It's elastic.co. We never bought the .com domain, so people will stick with the .co. For me personally, I have this unique handle, which is Xera, which is XERAA, and people are always confused, like why or where is that coming from? So the explanation is like, if you take my last name, which is Krenn, Krenn, and you rotate the letters by 13, that's the handle that you get, which is pretty unique. And the good thing about Rod13 is, like, if you rotate by 13 again, obviously 26 letters in the alphabet, you will back at the original. And Rod13, back in the day, for those who are old enough to remember, or for those who are very old in our industry at this point, Rod13 in the early days was like, you had the spoiler to a movie, or you were looking for illegal software. It's like Rod13 encrypted quotation marks. So nobody would accidentally find or read it. But it was easy enough to encrypt and decrypt. So my username comes from that, and I've been using that Xera handle on Twitter and GitHub and many other places on my domain and everywhere for more than 20 years. So that's where you can find me.
Well, there we go. Everybody try out your own name. If you get an interesting one and you don't mind sharing it, don't dox yourself, but let us know if you have also a really good one. I'm going to guess not all make such interesting sounding words as Xera, so that's a very fortunate outcome there.
I got lucky there, yes. I remember that I tried it out. I think I was on a tram and I tried it out on paper when I was, 16 or whatever. And I kind of like did it on paper, and I was like, okay, this is actually pretty good. I'll stick with that. And it has been going with me for now.
There you go. You were Rot13 in your name when you were 16. I was just doing that funny looking S that everybody drew in school. That's what I was doing. So, all right. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for us today. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Modern Web Podcast. And of course, thanks to our guest, Philipp. As always, we say the conversation does not stop here. You heard how you can get a hold of Philipp. We'll put all the links to him and Elastic in the show notes so you can get connected there. You can find me online at RoboCell. As for Danny, you can find him online at DThompsonDev. As for the podcast, you can find us online at moderndotweb.com or on Twitter at modern.web. And as we close out, we would just like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, one last time, who would like me to remind you that This. Is dedicated to guiding companies through their modernization and AI transformation journeys. This.Labs is a tech consultancy that specializes in amplifying your technical capabilities, whether it's expanding your dev team with seasoned professionals or streamlining your project's journey from ideation to deployment. We work with clients like Google, Microsoft, PayPal, and more. Check us out at this.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co. We also didn't get the .com, so there you go. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and we'll see you all next time.